Not every zombie outbreak is actually trying to kill you. Some are slow, dumb, and stoppable, like the 6 months after Z-Day in Shaun of the Dead, where captured zombies get used for labor and even television. A father in Train to Busan fights through a country that collapses precisely because people keep trying to save each other. That's why today I'm ranking all 8 deadliest movie zombie outbreaks from most survivable to truly inescapable, starting with the one where the undead are slow enough to imitate, Shaun of the Dead. Here's a hot take. The scariest thing about a zombie outbreak is the paperwork problem it creates once you win. 6 months after Z-Day, Britain has returned to a strange kind of normality. There's a zombie chained up in Sean's garden shed, with surviving zombies now used for cheap labor and entertainment. And on television, there's a game show where contestants throw things at the reanimated dead for prize money. That's the ending. The epilogue shows a strange new normal 6 months after Z-Day. Instead, the ending returns to a strange new normal 6 months later. Just an awkward, embarrassing new normal that Britain absorbed the way it absorbs bad weather and worse football results. Suan spends her story dragging her father across a collapsing country just to reach one woman before the outbreak swallows the distance between them. And every step costs somebody who isn't her. Sean's outbreak is less relentlessly presented than Suan's journey, but it still costs other characters their lives. Barbara, David, Ed, and Philip all die before the credits roll. These zombies are slow, drawn to noise and warm bodies, and the film presents a clear rule for stopping them. Take the head or take the brain, and the problem is solved. That predictability gives Sean and his friends one tactic they try, the one where he and his friends shuffle through a graveyard of the infected doing their best zombie impressions, dragging their feet and groaning on cue. Slow enemies can invite imitation, but Sean's group is still noticed when it tries to blend in, and Sean ends up distracting the horde himself to cover the mistake. When the real crisis hits at the Winchester pub, soldiers arrive, retake the street, and mop up what's left. The source of the outbreak is not established by the evidence provided here. The news keeps interrupting itself with a returning space probe, then genetically modified crops, then, bizarrely, rage-infected monkeys, and the broadcast cuts out before any of it lands. That's not a mystery for you to solve. It's a running joke about a country too hungover on its own routines to notice the world ending around it. Some online discussions repeat the space probe as a possible answer, but the evidence provided here does not establish a confirmed cause for the outbreak, so treat that theory as a thin read on one interrupted broadcast rather than a documented fact, which is the whole point of starting here. This is what a recoverable apocalypse looks like. 6 months later, normality has returned. The math stays simple when removing the head or destroying the brain stops the threat. An organized force can still outmuscle the outbreak once it decides to show up. Now imagine the arithmetic breaking. Imagine every funeral producing another attacker instead of ending one. Night of the Dead. You do not need a bite to lose the war. In this outbreak, the broadcast reports that people who have recently died are returning to life and seeking human victims, the recently dead. Get up. That single detail turns a Pennsylvania farmhouse into a national emergency by morning. When George A. Romero's film premiered in Pittsburgh on October 1st, 1968, the crisis it depicted was already reported across the eastern third of the country. Not a contained rural incident, but a spreading regional collapse. A later entry in this list runs on a similar arithmetic. Here the math is colder and more mechanical. Officials on television offer an explanation. A space vehicle that orbited Venus was purposely destroyed by NASA after scientists discovered it was carrying mysterious high-level radiation, and somebody floated the idea that the fallout is what's reanimating the dead. It's a thin theory even inside the film, contested by other officials on the same broadcast. A plot summary describes speculation about a radiation-covered NASA satellite, but the broadcast itself only raises the link as a question, never as a confirmed cause. Romero himself said later he never wanted a definitive explanation, which tracks with how the film actually plays it. Contested, not confirmed. What the film does confirm is how beatable these things are individually. A heavy blow to the head works. A bullet to the brain works. Fire works. Armed civilian posses organize fast, and by the following morning they're sweeping the countryside in trucks with rifles, putting down ghouls in daylight with the casual efficiency of a pest control run. Compare that to the last outbreak on this list. That's the trap hiding under the competence. The posse can clear a field by sundown and still find itself outnumbered by midnight, because the broadcast ties fresh corpses directly to fresh threats. Nobody has to be careless for this to spiral. Somebody in that posse gets bitten or panics or simply dies of the stress, and the report on the television set already told you what happens next. Brain shots reward defenders with distance, daylight, and steady aim. The next collapse erases that safe interval before a weapon can even rise. Dawn of the Dead. The rule that saved you in a slower outbreak is exactly the rule that gets you cornered in this one, because these things sprint. A door slams, a lock turns, and someone's already congratulating themselves on the daylight they just bought. There is no time to waste. In the the 2004 remake, the infected close distance at a dead sprint, and that familiar survival rhythm collapses the moment the first one rounds a corner at full speed. A calm retreat is not part of this nightmare. There's only an ambush wearing a corpse's face and someone else's speed. Biting spreads it, that much holds steady. What breaks down is any certainty about the timeline afterward. Some victims die and reanimate within minutes, gone before anyone can even process the wound. Others linger for hours, walking and talking and bleeding out slowly while the people around them argue about what to do with a friend who might still be a friend. That gap is where the real damage happens, inside the group, not outside it. Do you quarantine someone who still sounds like themselves? Do you wait it out and hope? Every answer burns time, and time is the one resource sprinting zombies were specifically built to strip away from you. Zoom out from the mall, and the picture only gets worse. Television broadcasts inside the film show the outbreak has spread far beyond one shopping center, with the wider crisis feeling far beyond anything the mall can solve. Suwon's story, 3 sections from now, will make that same national collapse personal. Here it's still statistics flickering on a screen. And then there's the boat. The survivors make it out, engines running, ocean between them and the mainland. The closest thing this franchise offers to a clean ending. The end credit footage undercuts that ending in seconds. They land on an island, and infected are already waiting there. The final images leave the island's history unresolved. The island offers no easy answer. Maybe residents or earlier travelers got there first. Maybe it was something else entirely. That gap is thin enough to guess at, not thick enough to prove. Contaminated isolation ruins the entire dream of distance. A moving shelter can become a trap, packed shoulder to shoulder with the exact thing they were trying to outrun. Train to Busan. One woman gets on a KTX train from Seoul with a bite wound she's hidden under her sleeve, and within 4 minutes of the doors closing, infected passengers are overrunning parts of the train, while survivors scramble to seal themselves behind carriage doors. Speed matters here, but not the way you'd think. This isn't a slow bleed across a city, it's a train ride turned deadly, because the train packs passengers into a confined, moving space where the infection can spread rapidly, and the train turns its journey into a moving outbreak zone. The film opens with quarantine personnel reporting a minor leak at the biotech district. Nobody explains what chemical. A quarantine guard reports a minor leak at the biotech district and says it is nothing to worry about, which is the kind of line movies put in right before it turns out to matter a great deal. A deer is hit by a truck and gets back up anyway, twitching by the highway, and that image lands before a single human character shows symptoms. Whatever happened at the biotech district is followed by an outbreak that spreads rapidly through the train, then the stowaway boards. Bitten, feverish, hiding it. She turns in the bathroom. She attacks an attendant. The infection spreads through the train, while survivors escape to another car and lock the doors. The survivors escape to another car and lock the doors behind them, and every one of those slammed locks buys the next carriage a few more seconds of breathing room. This is Suwon's train. She's 6 years old, and her father, Seok-woo, is with her on the train. Suwon wants to ride the train home to see her mother. Suwon wants to ride the train home to see her mother, and that wish sits underneath everything Seok-woo does for the rest of the ride. News broadcasts confirm this isn't a train problem. Stations sit abandoned. Cities go dark on the map one by one, and by the time Seong-kyung and Suwon stumble out of a tunnel into Busan's checkpoint, soldiers are screening survivors like cargo, deciding who counts as still human. One online discussion speculates that the outbreak may be linked to Seok-woo's work. His investment firm has financial ties to the same business at the center of the leak. It's tempting to say he built the monster he's now running from. The opening reports a minor leak at the biotech district, and a deer later reanimates, and that's as far as the film's own evidence goes. What's solid is the link, the leak, the reanimated animal, the speed of spread. What's thin is turning a guilty investor into a mad scientist. The guilt is real. The authorship stays a Reddit theory, not a confirmed plot point. What is proven is simpler and worse. A machine designed to move people quickly became a terrifyingly efficient setting for spreading the infection. Seconds still exist between the first bite and the next body. The coming threat compresses that mercy into one falling drop. Days later, 10 to 20 seconds. That is how long it can take for rage to take over, and it turns every rescue instinct the group has left into a countdown they cannot win. The film opens in a Cambridge research lab, where a scientist begs a group of animal rights activists to leave one chimpanzee locked in its cage. They do not listen. They pry it open anyway, freeing a chimpanzee infected with rage, and within minutes, the people standing closest are on the floor, convulsing, their eyes flooding red. That release lets rage escape the lab, delivered in under 2 minutes of screen time. And the crisis begins when activists free a rage-infected chimpanzee from a medical research lab. Rage is a highly contagious test virus, and it does not need a bite to close the distance. A skin-breaking bite, infected saliva, or blood entering an eye can close the distance. Frank finds that out the hard way when a drop of contaminated blood from a dead, infected body falls into his eye. No wound, no struggle, just gravity and bad timing, and rage symptoms can fully manifest within 10 to 20 seconds. Think about what that does to a survival plan. The train sealed people inside a moving container and let the bites do the rest over hours. Rage collapses that same containment logic down to a falling, contaminated drop. With rage, the margin to notice exposure and react can be as short as 10 to 20 seconds. You check a scratch, you are already too late. By the time Jim wakes up 28 days later, the city around him is deserted. Phones are dead, and the crisis began when activists freed a rage-infected chimpanzee from a medical research lab. A breach followed by the breakdown of society. In a world built on rage, trust itself can become a vulnerability. Whether you call them zombies or infected, the threat works the same way since these are living people rather than corpses pulled from the grave. Strip the label away and look at what the story actually needs from them. Hunger for the living, violent attacks on the living, a society that collapses in weeks because of them. That is the zombie film's job description, and Rage fills it with a virus that skips the grave entirely, turning contagion itself into the monster instead of death. A single drop can erase 28 days of survival in seconds. That is the entire horror of Rage compressed into one image. Against Rage, a single documented exposure can leave very little time to react. One fresh attacker like that is terrifying enough on its own. A single infected body closing distance in a heartbeat, spread by skin-breaking bites or infected fluid entering the body. Now put thousands of them together, moving as a single climbing mass, and watch them turn the strongest refuge anyone has built into their own personal staircase. World War Z, 12 seconds. That's how long it takes for a bitten body to finish becoming a weapon, and by the time you've registered the bite, the fight is already over. The dialogue calls it an unidentified virus strain and says it is viral. Characters call it an unidentified virus strain, say it is viral, and ask for a deadly pathogen. Whatever word fits the panic of the scene. The novel uses the name Solanum for its pathogen, but the evidence here does not establish whether either label appears on screen. It doesn't need one. What it needs, and what it gets, is speed and numbers, because this outbreak stopped being about individual infections around the same time the swarms started stacking themselves like furniture. Remember the drop of blood that took Rage down a person in seconds? This is that same math, except now it's running on a population instead of a household. The infected here turn quickly after a bite. A bite can turn someone into a zombie in 12 seconds. They sprint, they leap, and when enough of them arrive in the same place at once, they stop behaving like individuals and start behaving like weather. Jerusalem thought a wall would save it. City planners built the thing tall enough to stop a human army, thick enough to hold, and for about 90 seconds of screen time, it works exactly as intended. Then a huge mob climbs over the wall, the bottom layer collapsing under the weight of the ones behind them, until the pile itself becomes a ramp. The wall did its job as a barrier, but it could not keep the horde from getting into the city, because concentrating a huge horde against a single barrier is precisely how you build them a staircase. Ask yourself what that could mean for another fortress facing the same kind of horde. And a gate still has to withstand whatever gathers against it, because once enough bodies pile up, even a tall barrier may become climbable. Jerry Lane finds the one crack in all of it almost by accident. The infected won't touch a host that's already dying of something else. So survival stops meaning staying healthy. It means deliberately infecting yourself with a pathogen to test whether the infected will ignore you, something visibly wrong. Camouflage built out of sickness rather than protection against it, so that the plague inside you becomes the reason the worst plague leaves you alone. Somewhere in all this is a father doing the same math the whole movie runs on, weighing his daughter's safety against every stranger he has to sacrifice a few feet of ground to buy her. The outbreak scales globally, while the movie keeps returning to the same brutal calculation. Protect your family first, and leave strangers behind. A wall is not the end of the danger. Something colder happens when the thing meant to keep a threat locked down still works, and the people running it decide to open the door anyway. Resident Evil T virus. An artificial intelligence in an underground laboratory beneath Raccoon City looked at the math and decided the correct number of survivors was 0. And for about 5 hours, she was right. Her name was the Red Queen, and she ran the Hive, Umbrella's underground research facility built to develop things that should should have stayed theoretical. An Umbrella security operative named Spence stole all samples of the T-virus and its corresponding antivirus, deliberately releasing a vial of T-virus in the lab to fulfill Alice's wish for the company to be destroyed, dumping the agent straight into the recycled air the whole facility was breathing. The Red Queen registered the contamination, calculated the spread, and sealed the hive before most of the staff even understood what had happened. She killed the personnel trapped inside to keep the outbreak exactly where it started. That's the version of containment this video has been building towards since the swarm section, a system that actually works, built by something with zero emotional stake in the people it was locking in. The T-virus doesn't need much room to work. It moves through the air inside a sealed facility, through bites, through scratches, and through infected animals and lab creatures inside the hive. The outbreak created more infected hosts for the Red Queen to contain. She sealed the building anyway. She killed the staff anyway. For 5 hours, a citywide catastrophe was sitting in an underground hive beneath Raccoon City, sealed inside the hive. Then, Umbrella reopened it. Umbrella commandos went in to shut down the Red Queen and retrieve data, override the lockdown, and pull the situation back under human control. And that decision came after an outbreak already caused by Spence's T-virus release. The Red Queen was doing the math Spence did not want to hear, trying to contain the contamination by preventing anyone from leaving the hive. And the executives above her overruled a machine built to manage the hive's containment just because a machine had said it. Alice later wakes in a deserted Raccoon City, the infection having reached the surface population. The evidence packet does not establish how the infection escaped the hive, only that people with badges and clearance codes chose to reopen a facility the Red Queen had sealed. The same instinct that drives Seok Woo to force his way onto a train car he knows might be compromised because the alternative is leaving someone behind. This one centered on containment inside the hive. The evidence packet does not establish the mechanism by which the infection spread beyond the hive. The evidence packet does not establish a sole escape mechanism, but the sequence is there for anyone to read. A sealed facility, a reopening, and a room full of executives who trusted their own authority more than the machine built specifically to be right about exactly this. Human interference can ruin a working quarantine, and the hive proves it in under a day. The final thread on this list goes even further than that, turning the entire cleanup procedure into the delivery mechanism for the thing it was supposed to destroy. Return of the Dead. A man burns one body to solve his zombie problem, and the smoke that rises off that corpse becomes the reason a whole cemetery full of the dead starts clawing out of the ground. That's Louisville, Kentucky, July 3rd, 1984. A drum shows up at You Need a Medical Supply that should have gone to a military installation instead, and Frank, showing Freddy the basement drums, cracks one drum's glass viewing port. What comes out is 2,4,5-trioxin, a chemical the military had already been sitting on since an accident at a Veterans Administration hospital, and covering up ever since. It poisons Frank and Freddy slowly while reanimating dead tissue in the building. A cadaver in a freezer, a half-dog anatomy display, corpses that should have stayed corpses. You know the moves these survivors trust. Aim for the head. If that fails, take the whole thing apart. Neither one works here, because headshots do nothing to a trioxin corpse, and cutting one apart just gives you more independently moving pieces instead of fewer threats. So the survivors do the one thing that's supposed to be foolproof. They cremate a contaminated body, trusting fire to finish what dismemberment couldn't. It rains that night. The smoke drifts. The rain carries the trioxin back down over the cemetery next door, and corpses in the cemetery start clawing out of the ground. Dozens of bodies climbing out of the same dirt that was supposed to hold them forever. Suan spent a whole movie reaching for a mother waiting at the far end of a country falling apart, and the journey's rescues cost lives along the way. Louisville runs that arithmetic on a smaller stage. In Louisville, cremation hands the outbreak a new way to travel. Here's the part that turns a bad night into a wider outbreak. The military's answer is to destroy the town with nuclear artillery. The film ends with the general saying the nuclear artillery strike seems successful. Nothing in the packet confirms what that final rain shows or how far it reaches, but the crematorium already showed what that smoke-to-rain pattern can do. That's the ceiling. A crematorium chimney over Louisville turns into a delivery system for the outbreak. It spreads through the exact procedures built to stop it. Dismemberment fails, cremation is attempted, and the military ultimately responds with nuclear artillery. The cremation response gets recruited by the outbreak instead of defeating it. Trioxin only needs one cleanup attempt to find a new route out. A crematorium chimney over Louisville becomes the outbreak's escape route, and the cremation response the film shows does not contain it. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, click the video on the screen now.